This afternoon, we have an incredible panel of leaders to help guide us and inform us. Leading today's discussion is someone who needs no introduction to this particular group, Kaushik Rajgopal, Chief People Officer of PayPal and Chair of the Bay Area Council. Joining him are three other great leaders. Michael Bernick is an employment and workforce expert and former head of the California Employment Development Department. Shulagna Dasgupta is Senior Managing Director for Talent and Organization at Accenture. And Corey Davis is Chief People Officer for Genentech. I don't think we could have assembled a deeper or more knowledgeable bench of leaders and experts on this topic. Enjoy the conversation.
I'll call this the Navigating Uncharted Waters panel because we're hopefully, with the stormiest seas of the pandemic behind us, we're now contemplating what the labor force looks like, what the return to work looks like, what, importantly, mental health looks like in the workplace. And you're all pioneers in thinking through and navigating all of that. Michael, maybe we'll start with you. Always good to start with data. How do you see the labor force today? How do you feel it's different than before? How's it evolving?
Well, Kaushik, I entered the system in 1979, the employment system, and have been through 4 or 5 major recoveries, and this one's very different. I mean, there's a lot to be said about it, but obviously the main difference is in the previous recoveries, they were demand limited. In other words, it took us time to get the jobs back. Now, it's getting the workers back. So I think there are 3 data sets I'd emphasize. One is that I think all of you are familiar with, the monthly data that comes out from EDD. Very positive, Kaushik. Our unemployment rate is down to 4.3%, very low by historic standards. We've gained over 2.5 million, or recovered 2.5 million jobs that we lost. That's over 93% of the jobs we lost. So that's very positive information. Now, there are 2 other data sets, though, that are, I think, show really the cross currents in our economy. One is my favorite data set. It's the JOLTS data set. This is the job, BLS puts it out on a monthly basis, and it looks at job turnover and job openings. And I love it because it really shows the enormous volatility we have in our state and our nation, almost Brownian motion of people moving in and out. So the most recent California data came out this morning, and it shows we had, what do you think? How many job openings do you think we had last day? 1.2 million, over 1.2 million. Wow. Actually, it's 1.28 million. So this is the highest level the last couple months we've had, really since the series started in the early 2000s. So we have this large number of job openings. The third data set is the labor force participation. And that's picked up a little bit, but the most recent rate is 62%, well below the pandemic, well below what we had actually in the late 80s and early 90s. So we have these cross currents in terms of, yes, we are recovering jobs, the unemployment rate is low, but we still have a large number of job openings, and we have a large number of workers on the sideline. And finally, I'd say, people say, well, why aren't people coming back? Because I think a lot of us thought that when the enhanced unemployment insurance benefits ended in September, we'd get people back. And people have begun to come back. It's been much more of a trickle, though, than a large number. You're familiar with the reasons. The retirement rates in California have gone up, and there's still the concerns about COVID. But there's something else that I haven't seen in 40 plus years going on, and that's the continued reconsideration. And you have 2 earner families now reconsidering and wondering, hey, maybe we don't need this. Maybe we save money on childcare and transportation. And this reconsideration is very different than our previous recoveries over the past 40 years. And that's what we're going to, I think, need to continue to monitor.
That's great. Thank you for that very fact-based foundation for the conversation. And as somebody whose job description includes hiring software engineers, I can certainly attest to the large number of job openings and the very low unemployment rate. I'd also add that as a digital business, like many other digital businesses which are abundant in the Bay Area, we've gone to a form of flex or hybrid work. Our real estate team reports to me, and we like to say that 30 is the new 60, whereas 60% was peak utilization for an office in the Bay Area back when gas was $3 a gallon. It's probably more like 30% now. And so in that vein, Corey, maybe would go to you as a Bay Area employer on hybrid and remote work. What do you see as the reality today, and how do you see hybrid and remote work evolving?
Yeah, thanks. So first, I want to thank Lynn for introducing us all as experts in this. And I can't say that I'm an expert in this because we're all figuring it out. I know many of you are as well. Certainly, I think it's here to stay, right? People have higher expectations post-pandemic of what their flexibility looks like. So trying to revert back to pre-pandemic flexibility isn't really working. That much we know. In Genentech's case, we certainly continue to value our campuses. And they're places of connection. People feel more sense of belonging when they're together in person. The collaboration and innovation that happens in those serendipitous moments where people can get together and have those hallway conversations. And it really elevates, learning. And you can think about, yes, we were productive during the pandemic. Yes, we checked the box on all of our work, but was it the best work we could do? Was it the most joyful work we can do when we're not together? And so for us, it's really been about how do we balance the importance of being together, the importance of that in-person presence and connection, also for the sake of our community, right? We do have great community in South San Francisco, and we have our infrastructure and our buildings, and they're there for a reason. We also have a lot of staff who have to be on site, right? So our production folks, are the people in our research labs, and all of the people who need to collaborate with them as well. So we've been thinking about it as it's not really a one-size-fits-all. Even within our company, we have different functions who do different things. We have a diversity of individuals, obviously, who like to work in different ways. We have global functions, we have local functions. So there's a lot there. And so in our case, we've been thinking about what philosophy do we have at the quote, enterprise level? What functional sort of coordinated presence needs to happen for the sake of the work of that function? And then where do we leave it to teams, managers working with their teams around where they truly believe they need to be together, the type of work that they're doing, accommodating certain individual needs. So I think this, trying to institute this rule around what it has to look like for all is, at least we're finding that that's not the answer.
That's great. And we've gone down very much the same path. We've used the guiding principle of, as you said, do what's right for the work backwards from what the customer needs. And the customer could be an external customer or an internal customer. Some of our teams are coming in 3 days a week. Some are coming in, twice a month. Shalagna, I'd love to go to you on this because you have a great vantage point from engaging with different clients. And I'm curious if you see any variations across sectors, across clients. What are you seeing on this front?
On just remote work? It varies a lot. I think a lot of what Corey was talking about, there are certain workforces, if you're in manufacturing or if you required, from a statutory standpoint, you're needed to be in the building. Of course, those are the workforces that are, much more in person. But I think across anywhere where it is something that could be left to choice, we're seeing much, much more of that. I mean, anyone that can give the employees the choice, the managers the choice, you figure out what works best for your team and for you individually. You define your own normal. That's becoming more of the norm. So the new normal is there is no norm. You figure out what works for you. And it's not just about the space, but it's also the time, it's the style, just a lot more fluidity in our relationship with the work. So lots of variation.
Yeah, and it certainly highlights the uncharted waters metaphor. And I also think this conversation highlights the privilege of even talking about this, right? Because to your point, more than 55% of the workforce worked through the pandemic in person. Healthcare workers, retail workers, dock workers, essential services, and this conversation about hybrid and remote work is really one chunk of the workforce.
For sure. Gosh, but I think the one thing that's emerging very clearly is anyone that did have the chance to go remote, most of them don't want to come back. They want to have that flexibility. They want to, be able to drop their kid to school and pick them up from soccer and, really have that little bit of balance that they now have because they're working from wherever they can and whenever they can. So that's another pattern that's emerging that, it's just the way, Corey, you started. It's here to stay.
Yeah. And on the topic of balance, what do you see your clients and employers broadly doing to help foster that and invest in flexibility? And Corey, maybe I'll go to you next on that one.
Yeah, I think this is another one where there's no easy recipe, right? But certainly what we found through the pandemic is the burnout was real. People were shouldering so much, both professionally and personally, with everything going on. And it started to become okay for people to say, hey, I'm at my limit. Like, something's got to give here. And I think that actually was a good thing, because before it was sort of taboo to be able to say if you were at your limit or you needed help, you needed support, and through the pandemic it became okay. And also what we found were people weren't taking the time, because they were home anyway, so they were hoarding their vacation because where can I go? What am I going to do? So they weren't taking the time to themselves. So two things that we did that I think were really important. One, we had to make it okay for people to say no to work. And that's really anti-culture for us. We're sort of a yes environment. I'm sure a lot of companies are like that, where it's like, yes, how can I help? Or what can I do? And at some point, you just have to learn to say no and ruthlessly prioritize. And not prioritize the easy stuff, but ruthlessly prioritize and be able to say no. And the leaders had to model it. It couldn't be like, oh, yeah, you could say no, but I still need this done. So that was one. And then two is just taking the time. Take the time off, and when you're off, really be off. It was so easy for people to sort of blend their work and off time when they were just at home. And so we've really made it a priority for people to truly take the time away and to leave people alone when they're away. It's amazing how much we work on our vacations, right? And so trying to get people into that habit of really taking a break.
And one of the things we've done in that vein, one of our values is wellness. And once a quarter, we shut down the entire company for a day, so that you don't have the phenomenon of some group is off, but you're still getting pinged on email and Slack to do something. So this upcoming Friday is our wellness day.
Nice.
So nobody sends any emails, any messages, any texts, and the full shutdown means that you can truly shut off. Shalagna, any observations from you on this?
I would say, the one other thing that I'm noticing across the board is, of course, there's process and policy and, infrastructure type things that we're doing a lot. There is another sort of key thing that's emerging in leadership, or how we define leadership, or what is good leadership, which is so critical to making any of the policies or approaches that you both talked about tick and stick. So, for example, coaching new leaders that, empathy is a non-negotiable. You absolutely have it front and center in your leadership style. Compassion, it's important to, have that level of compassion. Authenticity, think about authenticity. Things that never showed up in a lot of leadership dictionaries in the past, but we're starting to see much more of that, and organizations actually investing in new leaders, and also I'd say old leaders that have been leaders for a long time, that modern leadership needs to look a little bit different with some of these softer things, and do it all with, true authenticity. Corey's example that, you have a policy, or I had someone call me from a local startup that, they lost someone to COVID, they lost a loved one, they called their work, they informed their manager, and the manager said, I'm so sorry to hear that, but hey, can you get that file over to me over the weekend? That's not empathy. You're trying to fake empathy without authenticity. So, just keeping in mind that how do we create cultures and create leadership frameworks where there is much more of this modern leadership embedded to make some of the policies and rules and approaches that both of you talked about.
Yeah. There's a great observation by Maya Angelou that in the long run, people will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And in the story you just shared, I can just imagine how that, can you get it to me on the weekend request, made the person feel. Right?
Yeah, it's like you're faking it. You can send me the memos, but you're faking it. So yeah.
So we're in the era of the empathetic leader, and at the same time, leaders still have to get the right talent and get things done. So, Michael, going back to you on an incredibly tight and, as you said, quite interesting talent market, what are the things that leaders and companies should be thinking about and doing to attract and motivate talent in this environment?
Well, the national administration, national economy is already helping, you know, in terms of the economy slowing down. The very tight labor market we have isn't going to continue. Now, how quickly things change, how deep the recession is, we don't know. But there's no question, and Sean will agree, there is no question things are going to change quickly, or to some extent. The most recent job numbers will be coming out on this Friday. We won't see a big change. Nationally, the numbers for May are still way down in June. But this morning, in the JOLTS data, the number of separations, these are voluntary and involuntary, went up in California pretty significantly. We had 673,000. Again, this enormous volatility in our economy. So we're beginning to see some signs, not at PayPal, but at other tech firms, or with layoffs, or not really layoffs, but short, free hiring freezes. So we're beginning to see some signs of this, and again, Sean, I know, has done a lot of work on this. So part of it is the very tight labor market we've seen is going to start loosening up. Two, as to what Cora was saying on remote work, that's a big challenge. Back in the early 90s, I remember people in the Bay Area kept talking about telework. Oh, we need to turn to telework. A lot of articles written about telework. So nothing happens, has virtually no impact. And then in 2020, along comes Mr. COVID. So, and things are never going back. That is, from any 50-year perspective, that is the main change for me. I don't know if you agree, but in terms of the pandemic. This remote work, we're never going back, no matter how many happy hours or lunches or so forth. So how companies manage that, I think, will be a key issue. And finally, I'd say, I want to make a pitch for something today, and that's the public workforce system. Now, we have an enormous public workforce system in California, 45 local workforce boards, who try to work with employers in terms of providing workers, upgrading workers, providing skills for the incumbent workforce. Very underutilized. Like most things in state government today, it's awash in state money. And I really think as we ask the question that you did, which is how to keep talent, how to promote people from within, how to help people move up within the company or within the sector, I'd really make a pitch for this public workforce system that is really dying to connect with employers, and I think we need can get a much better connection. And it's all free of charge.
Thank you. Corey, as somebody who thinks about it from an employer perspective, what are some of the things you're doing to motivate and retain talent in this environment?
Well, certainly, I mean, in terms of also attraction, it's been interesting. So biotech's still going strong. There's a lot of competition out there, still lots of investments. We are starting to see a bit of a slowdown there. But the other thing is we're getting into new areas like artificial intelligence, machine learning, computational science, that we need to look cross-industry, and namely in high tech. And so we're doing a lot more targeted marketing, a lot more around value proposition. That holds for both attraction and retention. So what's our purpose? What are we really trying to accomplish? Who do we serve? How can people have really fulfilling learning and growth opportunities and career advancement opportunities within the company? And it's a little bit harder when you're attracting someone from, let's say, high tech to biotech, where the value proposition of their career there isn't as clear as it would look in a high tech company. So I'm certainly looking at some of those things. But ultimately, I would say, again, both for attraction and retention, it's all about the employee experience. It's making sure that they're having a great experience when they're there, that they have all the tools and resources they need, that there's a culture of support. And so we spend a lot of time just thinking about our culture and all the things that we provide to ensure people feel supported in their work and life.
It's a great observation. And as you said, also this notion of getting people excited about what do we stand for. There's the apocryphal story of the bricklayer who says, I'm not just laying bricks, I'm building a cathedral. And Shalagna, I'm just curious, how do you see employers tackling this question of purpose and bringing that alive on a day-to-day basis with their people?
Kaushik, it's really interesting. We've talked about purpose, not as much as some of the other things we talk about in human capital, but I think in the last 3 years, it's this thing that Michael just talked about, whether you call it reconsideration or reflection. Everybody has had the cocooning time to sort of take a step back as employees and think about, who do I want to be when everything opens up? Who do I want to be, and what do I want to do in the time that I'm away from my family? What do I want to do? And ditto from an employer's perspective, right? So I feel like this has been a very interesting purpose, has been a very interesting space for those of us that study it, that, even for employers, with the rise in employee activism, social activism, it's just been very interesting on how so many employers have leaned in and been so much more intentional about stating, this is our purpose, and here is how you can help. So I think, to answer your question, a few things, right? I think one, of course, is a lot more communication around what is our purpose, not just at the top level of the organization, but I'm seeing a lot of it going into objective setting and, and how they're coaching and training their leaders on how you think about how can that one employee, that one cashier, that one barista, how can they bring your purpose to life and really making it real for every individual, which I think is pretty solid. Two, I think measurement. We talked about sustainability earlier today. Sustainability measurement is so critical and so central to so many industries. But I'm also noticing, just anything and everything about purpose, how do you measure it, making it extremely transparent, not just to the employees, but actually to the broader community. To shareholders, to analysts, and saying, this is everything, this is how we think about purpose, here is how we measure it, and here is how we're tracking against it. The third one that I'm seeing a lot of is encouraging employees when they come through your door to tell you, what is your purpose? And how can I create an environment that I create a good match between your personal purpose and my company purpose? So you could be like really, really big into something to do with carbon footprint. Here is how we think about it. Is this going to jive? Because what you don't want is somebody whose life's purpose is A and you're doing B. You could have the best job for them, but they'll truly not feel that sense of purpose. So creating that connection right from day one and saying, what do you want? And I'm seeing that much more in how we are also sort of thinking about performance achievement or management, asking employees that, hey, coming through this reflection or through this reconsideration, what is your purpose and how might we help you achieve some of that? I know you want to say something.
Well, I just want to add this, that I'm very involved in autism employment over the past 10 years. So in autism employment, the key is, I've come to see, it's a certain patience and flexibility, but most of all, it's the match. Trying to make the right match, find something that people are really good at. And for some of the people in our autism community, it's taken us 8 or 9 years, and we're still working on it. But find something you're really good at and can really contribute. And from the company side, provide the supports. And in some ways, autism is writ large, I think, what's true of all today.
The one last thing I'd add, Kaushik, is, to employers, you're not going to be good at every purpose-driven thing. You're going to be great, fantastic at the top 2 to 3 things. I think it's really critical that they say that to their employees and they say that to the market, but then also say to employees, if you're interested in something else, again, going back to the matter of choice, feel free and come back and tell us what you did and we'll celebrate you. And I bring that up because so many times we're seeing employees saying, why didn't you respond to this matter immediately within the next 30 minutes? Or why didn't you make a statement about that? Or why didn't you do? And I think it's really, really important for employers to say, we're going to be great at some things, but we're not going to, from a purpose standpoint, we're not going to be all things to all people, but you have a choice.
Great. Thank you. I promised that we'd be trying to navigate uncharted waters at the beginning of the panel, and I think there were some compelling points of the compass that all of you offered. Tight labor market, but getting looser, importance of empathy and being clear about purpose, hybrid work here to stay, and primacy of the employee experience as companies navigate it. And I'm sure this is a dialogue we will continue. So thank you all for a terrific panel.